Don't forget to record the webinar, Wendy. First things first. So first of all, it's amazing to have so many people here this evening. Thank you so much. It's going to be a very comprehensive webinar. We've got a lot to share with you. You may have already been on some of our webinars that we've done over the last year to keep you up to speed with things. That has been exclusively for people who've donated to the cause. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on as well. I'm also really pleased we've got a lot of our panel here, our committee, the HMO Reform Group Committee. So they'll be popping up from time to time to add into the conversation, to guide you through what we've been producing, to help you, if you're going through this for the first time, if your HMO, all the rooms have been rebanded for council tax, B, if you want to help us fight this very unjust situation, and C, if you are prepared to reply to the consultation, which of course is what the purpose of the webinar is here for tonight. So we're really, really grateful that you've given up your time this evening. I know you could be doing many other things, but you've decided to join us this evening, so we're incredibly grateful to you, and we are immensely grateful to everybody who has already engaged with this, either with their local council or with the Valuation Office Agency or with their local MP. We know many people have been doing lots of great things behind the scenes, not just us, it's the whole community of HMO landlords. So we really want to thank you for being part of that, and thank you for being here with us tonight, supporting the cause and driving things forward. So there's a few things just to sort of bring your attention to. We've blocked out 2 hours for the webinar, but I'm not sure if we'll actually need 2 hours. We might finish in an hour and a half. Having said that, I haven't got Darren on yet. So when he starts speaking, it's just impossible to shut him up. So we'll have to see how that goes. We've also got some of the rest of the team are also going to step up at different points to share some of the other things they've been developing, tools that we think are going to help you. If you've got any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat panel. We'd love to see those. I will kind of I'll step back in a moment, and Darren's going to talk you through the consultation document and the questions and answers. Some of them are easy to answer, some of them are less easy, which is where our guidance will help you. Now, John, who's also a member of our panel, John McClelland, who is an HMO landlord, has done a wonderful job of producing an information pack. And again, towards the end of the webinar, I'll ask John to come and explain where you can find that, what the links are, so that you can download that pack yourself and get a copy of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And we're also going to be posting this, of course, on our Facebook group and across social media. And we're also going to be putting it on our website, so people can go to the website and download it as well. So also the recording, Emma, you put a question in the Q&A about the recording. So yes, we will be sharing this recording widely as well. So if you can't stay for the rest of the evening, you can catch up by watching the recording. And again, we will post this on our Facebook channel, our Facebook page, and we will be posting it in other places on social media and YouTube as well, so that you can access this. Or if you can just stay for a little bit and then you have to go, then we'll make sure that it's available to you as well. So and thank you to all of you as well who've been posting to other groups that you're part of, other networks, other organizations. We're really, again, just really grateful. I think we as a committee would say that this potentially is one of the biggest campaigns that really HMO landlords and landlords as a whole have made any difference to the government agenda really in the last 10 years. Since Section 24 came in 2014 with George Osborne, there was the tenant tax campaign, which obviously didn't achieve its goal. But we really believe that we can achieve this goal. It's literally a few weeks away from potentially becoming law that you cannot reband an HMO room which is not self-contained. And so we've made incredible strides, and we just really want to kind of capitalize upon it and push it forward. So really pleased to have you here. Dave, I'm not quite sure what your question is. If you can just clarify that a little bit in the chat panel, that would be really useful. As I say, I will step back and let Darren go through all the details. Darren, I'm here if you want any technical help, or you know, if I can share stuff on the screen, etc. And I'm then going to step back and just answer stuff in the chat panel and in the Q&A, so that everybody gets their questions answered as well. So I think without further ado, I will just mute myself and let Darren take over, if that's all right.
Wendy,
Mr.
before we do that, are you going to share your screen in regards to the questions and the answers?
What would you find easier? Would you rather me do that? Yeah, okay,
yeah,
I'll do that. Okay, fine. Just give me 1 second. I don't mind at all. No, that's fine.
That's a bit of luck.
I'll just get that sorted.
Hi everyone. If I rub in my hands, sorry, I'm in my garage. It's a little bit cold in here. I haven't worked in here for a couple of weeks, so apologies.
Darren, you might want to also just quickly say about how obviously we've seen the consultation now because it's gone live, but you might want to just say a bit about how we've kind of been involved, and it's not been the most perfect process.
Yeah, no, completely. So as a lot of the people in this group know, we've been lobbying hard, and obviously November we had end of October, November, we had the opportunity to have something presented in government, which was great. We then have the department obviously say that they'll give a consultation, and since that is read in Parliament, I've been working with the group in the background with the department to try and get the consultation right. We had 2 attempts at it, and when I say we had 2 attempts at it, they sent us the draft. I and the group went back and said, look, we don't think this is quite right, this question's right, this wrong, this question's right, this is good, this is bad. They obviously didn't have to take our views at the end of the day, but they have taken on board some of our comments, which is encouraging. And I think as we go through this, you'll see that there's some easy questions to answer, and there's also some technical questions that's been thrown in here. Would I say I'm happy with the consultation in general? Probably yes. Would I say I'm happy with some of the questions? Probably not, but we are where we are. And let's be honest, the outcome of this is all about the legislation wording being changed that stops this from happening in the future. So that's the most important thing. But what I want to encourage is, and so does the group, the more people that fills out this consultation form, the more it shows the government of what an important situation that needs to be changed. Because at the end of the day, this is not just affecting tenants, this is also affecting landlords as well. And one of the biggest bills I've seen since the VOA have been rebanding HMOs, especially in the last 18 months, is over £5,000 to a tenant. So that's the situation we're in. So let's hope this consultation and the answers that we send is encouraging enough for the government department to act on their promise to actually change the legislation. So I think that's a quick overview. Going to start very quick. So what I've done is the group as a HMO group is going to the committee, along with Alan Murdy, is going to send a very technical answer to each question back to the government on this. What I thought was right is that really some of the answers doesn't need to be as technical, because it's all about numbers here and everyone putting their point across. So there's some questions here that have got a tenant response and a landlord response. There's some questions that have just got a general response. You don't have to use these answers. This is just a guideline, and I've really written these in regards to how I would feel if I was a tenant, and how I would feel if I was a HMO landlord who had no idea what the background to all this rebanding was about. So I think let's start. Wendy's put up there, what are your views on the way that HMOs are currently valued for council tax? You can see that there are 2 tenant responses there. At the end of the day, like I say, we want tenants to answer these questions or answer this consultation as much as landlords. So Wendy, do you want to come in? Do you think it's right I read these out, or should we just leave them on the screen?
Well, we're going to let everybody have a copy of this. You'll get a copy of this. So it might be that we don't need to go through every single question and answer. I think that's a really good context. For those of you who are perhaps new to this, I'll try and be as brief as I possibly can, because I know some of you have been with us the whole way through because you've been facing this issue yourself. But for those of you who are kind of new, let me just kind of give you a bit of a summary. So November 2021, I was working with a client who'd had a 6-bed HMO rebanded for council tax. We fought it, he won. He got it overturned, he got all his backdated council tax repaid. Happy days. Fast forward a few weeks, I then got a very odd letter from the VOA about my HMOs in Stoke saying they were not going to reband them. Somebody had approached the VOA to ask if they would look at my HMOs, but because they didn't have any legitimacy as somebody who could ask that request, the VOA discarded that and actually then wrote to me saying we are not going to reband your HMOs. Now that almost gave me then the green light to start campaigning because I was safe. A few weeks later, I came across Darren. We then started chatting. He introduced me to Alan, who is his barrister, who I know Alan will be here, but Alan's been traveling today and he lives in Edinburgh. So Alan hopefully will be here a little bit later on. And we then formed a kind of group to start to campaign. Then we had various other people join us. John joined us, Matt Baker, who's also here tonight, I'm hoping he's going to speak a little bit later as well, joined us. And Neil Chadder as well has lately joined us from Nevo, and his experience has been extremely helpful because he used to be a political lobbyist. And we've got another couple of other people who do some admin for us. So the sort of time that we've been doing this, 15-16 months, to start with, we didn't feel we were making any progress at all. It was very, very slow. But through Darren's work with his local MPs, and he has been very badly affected by this with his own HMOs, gave him the drive to start to really start to push this at a ministerial level. And as a result, we had our amendment, which Alan has written because he's got the legal background and the technical knowledge to do this. So he wrote an amendment to the Levelling Up Bill. That amendment was read in the House of Commons last October. And Michael Gove, who's the Secretary of State for Housing, also almost rubber stamped it. Now, not quite, because there's a political process that has to be gone through. And as a result of him opening the door, or should I say, sort of putting the door ajar a bit, he said that the amendment would need to go through a consultation. And that's where we are today, that this legislation that is literally about to be enacted, we believe it's very, very close to being agreed. It still has to go through the process of being consulted. So that's why you're here tonight, is to understand what that consultation looks like, what the questions are, what they mean, and how we can help you. So I've just kind of wanted to say that to give you some context. So on this,
I think if we start going through the questions, I'm not going to go through the responses, Wendy. I think people can obviously see that as they go. Yeah. And obviously this is all going to be published, so people can download this, print it, do whatever they wish to do with it, use it as a guide if they want to obviously respond to the consultation. There's some good questions coming in as well. So I think if we go through this, then we can pick up some chat and Q&A questions. I think that's probably more beneficial to everyone in the group. And we're nearly up to 200 people, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So what are your views on the way that HMOs are currently valued for council tax? There is a response there for tenants to look at, and there's a response there for landlords to look at. So I'm going to come into the chat in a minute because there's some few questions throwing up here. So yeah, so let's just go through that. So that's question one. I've answered it as a landlord and as a tenant. Question two, what are your views on the extent to which HMOs are currently not aggregated for council tax purposes? Now, straight away, that rang alarm bells to me. So for people on the group who may not know what aggregated is or disaggregated is, let me explain. Aggregated is when one property pays one council tax. So you could have multiple bedrooms in there, as long as they're not self-contained, that is aggregated property. Disaggregated is when every bedroom has its own council tax. So I really wanted that question changed. What are your views on the extent to which HMOs are currently disaggregated? But they didn't say that. They said not aggregated. And as such, I've answered that in a way that tenants will understand that, or might not understand what that means, and neither will landlords. It's a bit of a trick question. The bottom line is what they are asking is, are currently not aggregated. So they're asking the question of how many disaggregated HMOs are there, or what's your views on how many there are in England and Wales. And the bottom line is no one knows how many disaggregated HMOs there are in England and Wales. All we know as a group is there's nearly 500,000 HMOs in England and Wales. That's all we know. So that's why I've written quite a detailed response there in question 2. If we can go down to question 3, Wendy. Okay. This is a question. In your view, are there any particular types of HMOs that are more or less likely not to be aggregated? Again, are there going to be any HMOs where the bedrooms are paying individual council tax? Please provide evidence where possible. Again, I've tried to give a simple answer with that, because at the end of the day, our argument is no HMO bedroom should ever be disaggregated if they don't have self-contained facilities. So the argument here that we've always said is why is a HMO being classified as individual dwellings when they don't have self-contained facilities? So there's a question there that needs to be looked at. And I say we can help with these questions, but this is a guide of what I think people would want to answer and an overview. Question 4. What are your views on the government's objective to deliver consistency of outcomes to the council tax valuation treatment of HMOs, and to ensure that HMOs are banded as one property? So that question 4 literally relates to the letter that we got from Michael Gove to say that the government's objective after the consultation is to make sure HMOs are banded as one property unless there are exceptional circumstances. So that basis of question 4 is very similar to the response that we got from Michael Gove, which is a positive response in my view. And again, we've just answered that very simply with what I think is a guide of how people should be.
Darren, can I just jump in for a moment?
Yeah.
A question on the Q&A was about disaggregation and aggregation. Could you give a little explanation of what those long words mean, please?
Okay. So aggregated basically means the property, everything within the property is banded as one. So if you take your usual family home, that is one council tax, and that will be basically aggregated. No different to a HMO. However, if your HMO has individual tenancies and some self-contained facilities, mainly along the way, the VOA and the local council will try and disaggregate that, so you are paying, or your tenants are paying, multiple council tax within one property. So basically, the easiest way of doing it is if you have a block of 9 flats, each of those flats within one building would be disaggregated and have their own council tax bill. However, those flats have self-contained facilities. What the VOA are trying to do here is they're basically trying to say that bedrooms with minimal facilities can also have their own council tax within one building. That is not right. And that's what we've been arguing about for the last 18 months. And this is what this consultation is about. Wendy, would you say that sort of sums that up? Oh.
Sorry, yes, I think so. I think that's true. I think there's clearly people here tonight who are quite new to the issue. So they haven't, they haven't got the context, if you like, that we've got. There's other people who've been following this for a long time because it's been affecting them. So we do apologise if maybe we're going a bit fast. If you're new to this issue, you might be thinking, hang on, I don't really understand what's going on here. The simplest way to put it is that an HMO in the law, we believe should be treated as one, what's called a dwelling. We're going to get into some technical words later, but it could be called a hereditament. Yes, my Latin comes into play all of a sudden, the Latin that I failed at school so badly. So we sometimes call it a hereditament. You might see that word popping up, but we generally use the word dwelling. And that's the word that the Valuation Office Agency, who bans properties in England and Wales for council tax, they use that word as well. And also local councils will use that word. So our campaign is to stop rooms that don't have self-contained facilities in being counted as a dwelling, because that's what the VOA have been doing. And the methods that they've been using to do this, we also believe, are outside of the law. So our campaign is to stop the outcome, but also to stop the methodology that they're utilising. And again, if you keep watching, we'll go into that. And, honestly, I do apologise at the start. The other things you could be doing on a Wednesday night, and I don't blame you if you want to leave the webinar now and go and watch the football or whatever's on the telly, because this is very technical. But we think it's really important that our community gets educated about it and starts to understand these intricacies and the technicalities. But please carry on putting stuff on the chat panel, because I'll try and keep answering.
No, listen, I think there's some interesting things coming on the chat, but let me just make one thing clear for those people who don't realise what, if they're new to it. If we don't stop this from happening, I believe every HMO in England and Wales will eventually get rebanded for council tax per bedroom. Now, if you want to know what that looks like, my ProPods business has 75 bedrooms rebanded individually, and everyone is paying £1,200 a year. So that's what it looks like to a portfolio. And this is why I've been very heavily involved in changing this law, because I do not want tenants and landlords up and down the country experiencing what we have been experiencing in our local authority, and what is clearly becoming the norm up and down the country for HMOs to be rebanded. So let me carry on with this. Let's get through the questions, because the quicker we get through the questions, there's nearly 40 chats going on here. So let's get through the question. Let's get through the consultation questions, and then we can come to some Q&A. So Wendy, if you can just scroll down to number 5 for me. And I say this will always be available for people to download, print, etc. And this is just literally a guide of what I and the group believe should be questions going back to this consultation. So in between question 4 and 5, Wendy, if you want to just scroll up a little bit, there is 2 options.
Actually, so we can see it. Let me just copy and paste that further up into the document, because then you'll see what the question actually is. Okay, sorry.
So the government's tried to put in 2 options of how would you, filling out the consultation, like to see the law change. Now, that really is a question that really shouldn't be on here, because at the end of the day, it's not fair on a normal person to understand what that means. I struggle to understand what that means, and I've been dealing with this for over 2 years now. So what we've done there, we've written a response from the tenant saying, I don't know the law and I feel unable to comment on either option, but what I want to ensure is that my bedroom is not banded for council tax. So that clearly answers that. And then from the landlord's response, there's a little bit more of a technical question there, but I can assure you that on the group's answer to that, it's very in-depth, and we will be challenging the government to make sure, because the bottom line is it's about the wording that goes before government to change the legislation. That is the crucial bit, so we can stop bedrooms being rebanded for council tax in the future. So Wendy, do you want to move up? There you go, we'll move down.
So do you want to go through the 2 options here?
Well, I think if we go through the 2 options, Wendy, I'll be honest with you, we believe as a group, and so does Alan, that actually those 2 options are not an option.
Yeah, okay, fine.
So I'm sort of trying to say to people, don't really ignore those 2 options, because the bottom line is we have an option, which is our amendment, which obviously people can look at and write back to the government. And
that is, of course, the option. That is the landlord response that we've written into this document. So if you look at that landlord response, we've stated that in our response, haven't we?
Okay, so
I'll carry on scrolling.
No, that's fine. So question 5, do you have any preference to how to deliver the government's objective to ensure that HMOs are valued as one dwelling, and if so, why? we've just made a very easy response there. I wish to see all HMOs are charged council tax on one property and not per bedroom. That's really as simple as it needs to be. Question 6, what are your views on defining HMOs as set out in the Housing Act 2004? Again, today, I can tell you now, we probably spent half an hour as a group on a Zoom call trying to get our heads around that. That's the Housing Act 2004 is probably the best definition of a HMO. So we've sort of basically just gone back to say, as you can see there, the definition of a HMO should be consistent across all issues, planning, licensing, building regs, and the Housing Act. So we've always argued that. And we've always said that it should be consistency across every department within government. So again, a very simple and easy response there. What are your views on defining HMOs using the definition of the Council Tax Liability Owners Regulation 1992? Well, if we use that definition, we'd be back to how we were. Nothing changes, which is why we basically said, please see my answer to number 6 above, because it's very clear what we want to see across all the departments within government. Question 8. In your view, is there any non-HMO accommodation that may be caught by either of the proposed definitions? Again, you can see how that's been answered there. To me, if people share facilities within a property, then as such, that is a HMO and should be charged as one property for council tax. This comes back down to the self-contained part of what is a self-contained facility and what is not. For those of you that are new on the group, self-contained is eat, sleep, wash, and cook. So if you can't do all those 4 things, you know, with it and draw a circle around it, then basically what we're saying, that's not self-contained, and there is law around that as well already. Question 9, are there any other definitions that would be more appropriate for the purpose of identifying HMOs in the context of establishing a council tax band? That to me is a horrible question to ask, because if people start questioning, well, actually you could do this, 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 and this, and this, my concern would be that the government goes, well, this is just too complicated to change and we're not going to do it, which is why I put there, I always understood a HMO as a property that is shared by others who are not related. That's a very simple response. And from the landlord's answer, you know, I believe the government understands what a HMO is, and they clearly do understand what a HMO is. Unfortunately, the VOA and the policy they work to doesn't. So that's a little bit more of a response there. Question 10. Are there any exceptional circumstances or types of HMO accommodation that in your view should not be covered? Again, we can't seem to think of those at the moment. That the only, you know, HMOs and HMOs rooms should not be covered by these changes, which are self-contained. So we know that there are self-contained rooms within HMOs. I think that's one where they may get banded individually, and we actually may see moving forward, if law changes, we may see landlord providers remove kitchenettes from bedrooms so they don't have individual bandings on their bedrooms. That's something that I think will potentially happen. I think removing a kitchen is easier than removing an ensuite. Number 11, do you agree that where separate areas of self-contained accommodation can be clearly determined in a HMO, the listing officer should be able to band each self-contained accommodation? I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and I think that's what will happen, if I'm honest with you. But to me, it has to have a functioning kitchen, because we are seeing in the market people classing dry kitchens. To me, I think it has to be a functioning kitchen with a sink with running water and actually a proper cooker or microwave oven. So that's my response on that. Question 12, should the changes be limited to HMOs with fewer than a certain number of separate let rooms? This has always been a little bit of a stab in the dark, really. I do think, and the VOA occasionally do reband large HMOs per floor. I think we may still see that, but again, I don't think there will be many people kicking up a fuss if they've got a 20-bed HMO and they're paying 3 bands of council tax rather than 20. That's if it's over 3 floors. Again, we're not quite sure how the government's going to respond to that, but I don't really think we can put a number on it. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, down to the listing officer's discretion, which we're not overly keen on. But I think the discretion has to be, it's either banded as one or banded per floor. It can't be banded individually. And I think if that happens, then actually we've won this argument again. Question 13. Are there any other approaches that you think should be considered to achieve the same outcome? Again, we've just gone back there and said a HMO is called a HMO for a reason, a house of multiple occupation. And this type of accommodation is a key part to the private rental sector. And it's true. We do know that actually the conversations I've had, the government didn't quite realise, I think, how many people live in shared accommodation. So I think this is where all this has come from. And I think it's encouraging that the government's actually realised that, you know, this is a tax on the tenant. And for those of you that are old enough on the group, this is technically a poll tax returning via the back door. And that's something that we're trying to stop. And then question 14, quite an interesting one. When implementing the changes, do you agree that this should be done through the formal proposal route so that HMO landlords have the opportunity to make a proposal to alter their band? 100% yes. I can tell you now, if the law gets changed, the minute I can put my proposal in for our 11 ProPod houses, then I will be doing so. And I think it may cause a bit of a backlog with the VOA, but I really hope that the VOA will go, okay, can you give me a detail of your property? Can you send me plans? It doesn't show self-contained facilities. I can see a communal lounge kitchen. Great, we're going to reband this back as one dwelling. Don't know what that banding will be. And what also may happen is, for those who have been from one band to multiple bands and go back a band, you might find it might not go back to the same band that you were originally. But again, if that happens, you will also have a right to appeal that banding once you get back to a single band. But I know, I mean, from my experience, I think if you go from a band C to a band D in Portsmouth, it's literally £200 extra a year. So, as I say, these are just suggestions. You don't have to follow these guidelines, but we just felt as a group, it would be more beneficial, probably not the best English, be beneficial to a lot of people to have a look at this and use these as guidelines to when responding, because I feel that the more people that respond to this consultation, the better the outcome will be. Wendy?
Yeah, fine. Sorry, did we get to the end? Did you do question 14? I was so busy.
Question 14. There's quite a lot there to read.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of questions.
So can I?
A lot of questions.
Well, can we?
There's 83 chats going on.
Could we come to the questions? So one of the questions that's come up, Darren, I think this is a really good one that we could discuss, is there a risk that by using this document, all of the answers become a little bit cut and paste, and that when they go to the government, they're all going to go, hey, they basically copied each other. They're all giving the same answer.
Is there a risk that no one fills it out? I think that's the question, because, you know, I think people look at that and go, oh my God, I don't quite know how to answer that. And I think with these guidelines, and let's be honest, they're guidelines. You can copy and paste them if you like. But at the end of the day, I'd rather see copy and pasted going back to the government on consultation with maybe a few little tweaks here and there than actually no one filling it out. Landlords and tenants are allowed to, obviously, you know, we're not here to tell you guys what to do. We just felt that it would be more beneficial so you could see what was in my head answering these questions for those who haven't maybe experienced what I've experienced in the last 18 months to 2 years. And Wendy and others on the group will probably tell you that I've been to hell and back. I answered those questions within about half an hour yesterday. But members of my staff looked at it and they didn't even get halfway through because they were like, we just don't know how to answer these. So I feel it is vital that people look at that guideline, those guidelines, but that's purely what they are, guidelines. If people want to copy and paste it, feel free to do that. I don't mind at the end of the day. I just hope we get enough people commenting and sending the consultation back.
So I've just gone on to the page that shows where the consultation is, and I totally agree with some of the comments that have been made. You know, this is probably one of the hardest consultations to reply to because, you know, it's clear that there isn't an easy way of actually answering questions online. You have to sort of fill it in like an examination. Again, this is why we wanted to encourage people to respond and to try and help you to do it in the easiest possible way, because none of us have got time to go through all these questions endlessly and then email our answers to the housing department. Now, as we've said, we've tried to weigh up how much of this is just simply a tick box exercise by the government, that they actually do want to get the amendment written into the Levelling Up Bill, and they're just doing this from a procedural point of view. I think there's definitely an element of that. However, I do think we don't want to kind of assume that that's all there is to this. I think the government probably do want to hear the voice of people who are affected by it and get their perspective. And already I think there's been some really good challenges brought up on the chat panel about types of HMO, for example, which is why we would say, please use your knowledge, your ability, your skills, your understanding of sectors of this market, which is very diverse, to reply to the consultation. We are not trying to tell you what to say. We just simply want to help you and to sort of empower you, I suppose, to feel that you can do it and edit and alter as you see fit. If you've got a particular story that you want to tell, if it's affected you in some way, these are very powerful testimonies. And I think that we should really, put those into your own response. So this is the page, the government page. We've put the link in the chat panel. Again, we'll be sending out the link so you can do it. If you want to write a response in pen and ink, and make sure you've got your finest ink pen and Basil Dubon note paper, of course, you can send your written responses by snail mail. The address is there on the screen as well. And you can reply anonymously. So if you'd rather not give your details, that's fine as well. If they do say it would be very useful if you could confirm in what, in what kind of capacity you're replying, but you don't have to do that. I suppose because they just want to assess, people's positions when they're replying. You might want to say, I'm an HMO landlord. That would be enough. You don't have to give your name, address, how many rooms you've got, and that you haven't been rebanded, because I know some people might be slightly concerned about that. So that's the government page. Again, don't worry about remembering all of these links. We'll put them in our response guidelines. We're going to give you a link to a shared drive where you can get all of this. So that's where that's all sort of situated.
So I'm just going through some of these chats. There's a couple here that I'd like to. Right, my nephew lives in university accommodation. How will this impact on him? It won't, because he gets exemption. Every student gets exemption, so that shouldn't really affect him. However, we have seen student properties rebanded in Portsmouth, and once they've shown that they are students, they are paying zero. I wonder if we can get chat to respond. Housing of these landlords. I would love to see as many people respond as possible. I think that would be very keen. I'd like this to be one of the biggest consultation responses that the government's experienced in a while. Julian, evening, hope you're well. What do you think is the best strategy for success? What numbers do we need? I think any numbers is more important than zero. What organisational stakeholders do we need to reply? I've already spoken to the comms team at the NRLA, and for those of you that know me well within the group, Ben Beadle and I get on very well in regards to this issue. So Ben's very much on our side, and Ben's been very vocal lately in the Renters Reform Bill and has raised this a couple of times as well. So it's good to have the NRLA on side. I'd love to have Shelter, but I don't think that's going to happen. Another side of the rebanding, which is rarely discussed, is what are the council services provided to tenants who pay individual council tax. I completely agree. That was one of the arguments, Polly. What actually does are the tenants actually paying for? And again, that was one of our arguments to government, which obviously pricked their ears up. Yeah, the LA washed their hands and they blame the VOA completely. Pip, I completely agree with that. However, the proposed effective date can only come from the local authority. So if your effective date is incorrect, you can easily have a moan to your local authority, because it's not the VOA that set the proposed effective date, it's the local authority. Any feel for how local authorities are going to put in a response? LA might put in, we should push back on. Well, I can tell you now, Portsmouth are going to actually respond well to the consultation, because actually they don't want to be charging tenants living in HMOs individual banding, because they cannot cope with the admin. So I know that for a fact, because we've dealt with over 150 bills on our portfolio, and that's growing daily as well. So they can't cope with the admin side of it, and actually they are chasing tenants all around the country for money that I don't think they'll actually see. So I'm hoping the local authorities don't push back, and hopefully they'll agree that this is the right thing to do. Is it a checkbox exercise by the government? What makes you think that they will take this seriously? Because it's been mentioned in Parliament. I've actually met Dina Davidson, who's actually the minister dealing with this. At the end of the day, they didn't have to mention this in government, and the group also has a letter to say that the government are proposing to change the legislation where HMOs are banded as one unless there are exceptional circumstances. So you can never say never, but the reason the deadline is so short is because the government are telling me that the law has to change before the royal assent. You will notice that some consultations are between 8 and 12 weeks. Ours is actually 6. So again, really encouraging from that point of view, but we can never say never. That's why we have to respond it's a numbers game now for me. We have to get the right amount of people responding to the consultation with the right information to give to the government.
Could I just go to a couple of questions that are in the Q&A? So first of all, I can't remember your name, sorry. Somebody asked me to show question 14 again. So let me just get that up on the screen again. Okay, can I answer the Phil question? Yes, please go ahead. Right, the question is, can you use part of the classification of HMO where utilities are paid for by the landlord, single payment as justification as a single council tax per dwelling? Well, at the moment, no, you can't, because I argued that, and the VOA are not bothered on who pays utility bills. It's irrelevant. I think moving forward, we won't have to have that argument, Phil, because of the law changes, and a HMO will be one dwelling regardless. You know, you can live in a block of flats and have a communal heating system. So we really didn't push back on that argument when the VOA announced that to us. I've lost my train of thought here. Okay, is there a new special HMO band for HMOs, a viable option and on the cards? At the end of the day, council are cash strapped and doing all they can to find extra revenue. Has this become a way of doing so? We don't really want a special HMO ban, because if you have a special HMO ban, in my view, the whole council tax rebanding has to be redone. And that looks like an absolute headache to the government. Although it's probably going to have to happen. I think, as we've heard many times from Alan, council tax is an absolute mess. What we're dealing with here is just a small section of the mess that council tax has created. But can I just mention there, if there was a special HMO ban, what would it look like, and what would it stop the government from increasing it? And local authorities could increase it. I bet that the government would give local authorities the discretion to increase what they felt fit for a HMO band. So, for instance, you could be stuck between a rock and a hard base. You could have a special HMO band, and they could say, right, do you know what? We're going to say it's £3,000 a year.
and there'll be no justification for it. Where at the moment, all they can do is band a HMO between band A and band H. So we did look at that, but my feeling was, and when I spoke to some powers that be, it would be easier that a HMO is classified as one dwelling, as it should be if it doesn't have self-contained facilities within the bedroom. Hope that answers that. If this is passed, will the council tax be backdated? Since my tenants have started paying council tax, I've reduced their rent, so I'll be liable to pay the council tax for the past month. I'll be twice out of pocket. Sadly, I don't believe they'll backdate it, because once the law comes in, the law will be from that date. Anything prior to that is prior. You know, I'm the same. You know, I and my investors of ProPods have paid thousands of pounds for backdated council tax, and so have tenants. All I can say to you is, I'm really surprised that your tenants are paying the that you've reduced your rents to allow the tenants to pay the council tax. Where I am in Portsmouth, we haven't had to reduce rents. We have passed the whole bill on to the tenant. Now, I appreciate that there is different demographics up and down the country and different types of tenants, but actually, we've actually found that tenants have accepted paying the council tax at the moment. They don't think it's right. And they're all for us lobbying to get it changed, but actually we passed that responsibility on to them, because we just couldn't afford to cover £78 a month out of their rent.
Ivona, I think we do accept that this is where, if you have already been rebanded for council tax, and either you've been paying it or your tenants have been paying it, and then the law gets changed, there is going to be you know, an adjustment period, we could call it that. We don't quite know what that will mean for people like yourself who've had their HMO rebanded. There is a question in the consultation, which is the question that I wanted to come to, actually, funnily enough, which is about the question 14 says, when implementing the changes, do you agree that this should be done through the formal proposal route, so that HMO landlords have the opportunity to make a proposal to alter their band? So there is a route, as you know, through the Valuation Office Agency for you to make a proposal to change the banding of your house. Now, this could be because a local supermarket's been built, or a new road has been built, and you think the value of your house has gone down. You want to be in a lower council tax band. I don't think anybody is going to say, I want to be in a higher council tax band, unless there's a reason for that, I suppose. So there is already a route to be able to propose. So we believe that what the government are kind of insinuating in this answer, or kind of referring to, is the possibility that if you are in that situation where you've already had your house disaggregated, you know, all the rooms are liable for council tax, that you could make a proposal to change the band. So our response is to that end, that if it's happened to you already, please still answer the consultation and write back to say, it's affected my HMO. I'm looking forward to the ability to propose a new banding, maybe band B or something, or band A, whatever it was before, once this legislation is passed.
I think what will happen is, once the legislation is passed, we will probably do another webinar on how you can fill out a proposal form and get that over to the VOA ASAP. That's probably the next webinar for us, ideally. There are tens of thousands of HMOs that are run by private providers who in turn occupy the units of vulnerable homeless and refugee people. Given that these providers are paid by the local borough, do the government realise? Yes, they do, but they didn't until we told them, Martin. So that is shocking in itself. However, there was some thoughts that if they are vulnerable and homeless, that they probably haven't been rebanded because they're probably temporary accommodation. But that conversation has been had and has been highlighted. What is your position on HMOs where some rooms are truly self-contained and other rooms are not? I feel that if some rooms are self-contained, they will be banded, and if other rooms aren't, then the house will be banded. This is where I feel people may remove facilities from their bedroom. I don't know what you feel here, Wendy. People may remove some facilities from their bedroom so that they can have all their house as one, rather than as a multiple mixture of one banding for a HMO and multiple bandings for self-contained bedrooms. We know this isn't perfect. And but we want to try and make it as good as possible. Any more Q&As? Can you put the link up? Yeah, we can do that. I'm sure Wendy can do that for you, Lucy.
Yeah, we'll get the link up. John, I'm going to try and get you, I've sent you a link to be on the panel. If you don't mind, I'd like to promote you. So just check that you've got a promotion to co-host. If necessary, I'll send that again. Alan, I have promoted you now to co-host, so you should be able to put your camera on, because it'd be good to get.
So does this apply to, hello, Alan.
Good evening.
Question: how would the council know if a property is a HMO or not unless it is licensed property, can be individually taxed per room? Secondly, tenants will run to properties. I completely agree with that question, and that's one of the arguments that we've had, that it's not a level playing field in regards to that. You can have one property that's been individually rebanded and one property that hasn't. We are seeing that in Portsmouth already, and I'm also seeing that up and down the country. But the idea of this new legislation is that will stop any HMO from being rebanded.
Can I just quickly say, I'm getting a few messages about the links. Don't worry, we will keep putting the links up. It's not always easy to copy and paste actually from a Zoom chat panel into another document. So don't worry if you lose the links. We will be sending these out. We're going to be putting them on our website. The source of probably the best source of this information from tomorrow morning is going to be our website. My plan is, once we finish the webinar, the recording will obviously render. We'll upload that to our website. We'll also upload the pack, which John has very kindly put together. I'm going to come to John in 1 second. He can explain what's in the pack and what's going to be in the pack, because there's a few other bits that we want to add in there. So the best site for you to bookmark, obviously Facebook is great, but you can still lose things in Facebook. They can go all over the place. It's our website. It's HMOs and Council Tax.co.uk. If you jump on that website, bookmark that website, that has all of these documents. And as of tomorrow morning, you'll be able to go on there and download all this information. So that's, if I can just point everybody to that for the time being, that hopefully will help you. Go to our website. That's the most important, if you like, source of all of the information.
Okay, a couple of questions, I think, before we get John and Alan in. Does this apply to Airbnbs? Technically, it shouldn't, because it's not main residency. People are only staying there short term. We can never say never, but I've not seen any Airbnbs that have been individually rebanded, unless they're self-contained. So I'm not quite sure what that looks like.
Well, could I just say, one of the few cases where it's been possible to overturn multiple bandings, and in fact they're still trying to work out what to do with it, was a property which did have substantial Airbnb bookings passing through it.
Yeah.
So even the authorities don't know what they're doing with this one.
No, so that's a little bit of a grey area, but I think most people with Airbnbs have just got a single banding council tax, I think, or business rates. How within the question answers can we best support the idea of planning permission and HMO licensing aligning with banding, please? I ask because there is obviously a disconnect where self-contained is being defined differently to the planning permission being granted. I completely agree with that question, and the answer is I do not know. Because when you speak to planning, they don't adhere to licensing, and when you speak to licensing, they don't adhere to planning, and building regs don't adhere to planning. The benefit system doesn't adhere to the council tax system, which is one of the things that we've put in the consultation guidelines, that we want to try and see things more aligned. The government's made this really hard, not us, and we've just highlighted the problem. So hopefully that last question, anonymous attendee, what feedback have you had so far that makes you quietly confident that it will pass through Parliament favourably? I'm not quietly confident, I'm confident. We've been lobbying hard for this. We discussed this with the VOA many times, hit a brick wall. We've had more housing ministers than that. I think we're up to 11, Alan, aren't we, in 3 years?
Indeed.
So we've nearly had a whole calendar year of of housing ministers over a 3-year period. I think where we are now is it's encouraging that the consultation's out. It's encouraging the letters that we've had. It's encouraging that the conversations that I've had. It's encouraging how the department for the government has interacted with us as a group to discuss this consultation. It's encouraging that the department has spoken to the NRLA about this. We've had more traction on this in the last 6 months than we've had in the last 2 years. So that's why I'm confident. And on top of that, they've shortened the consultee period to a 6-week period, which Alan will tell you is very short.
Can I just also add on that point, Darren, that privately, I've spoken to a number of VOA officers and people in local government who actually sympathise with what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's key. I think that is key. And I think what we're seeing here is tenants and landlord working together for the first time, actually lobbying together to make a change. And I think it's encouraging. And I think now is the time, because the government is realizing that actually landlords supply a good amount of properties to tenants. And the reason there's a national shortage of rental properties is because of the actions that the governments have taken in the last 10 years. So I think we're finally, we've got the ear of what we want, of the people that we want. I can't promise that this is going to go through, but this is probably the best chance that we will get. Okay,
a few other things. I'm just going to jump in. I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer question and answers in our chat. Oh dear, it's very busy tonight. So a couple of questions here. The C3 and C4 question. So this was where somebody put in a question about properties that are either C3 or C4 use. I think this is a mixed use C3, C4 situation actually, and could result in a family paying 3 or 4 times council tax A banding.
Right, can I answer that? Because I have that answer. So I've raised this with my local authority. If you have a C3 and C4 use, mixed use, and your C4 gets individually banded for rooms, and then the next year you move a family in, are the local authority going to chase the family for 5 bedrooms whilst that appeal is going through? The answer is yes, they will. Which is just scandalous. So C3, C4 obviously works very well in planning, but it doesn't work in council tax law, which means every time you have to appeal to have your proposal, make your proposal to get the property rebanded back as well. And then you could have a family in there for a year and then think, actually, I'm going to rent it out to HMO tenants. And then you could have it rebanded again. So yeah, that is an utter madness of a system. And if the law is changed, that will stop that from happening.
Okay.
Someone put, do we actually know how many HMO tenants there are in England and Wales? Well, I personally believe there's 3 million. If there's 500,000 HMOs, I believe on average 6 people are living in a HMO, so that's 3 million. It could actually be more. I saw that earlier on the chat and I didn't get around to answering it.
Okay, a couple of other things here. I'm going to put the links on in a minute to the pack. There's John, fantastic. Sorry, that was my fault for not promoting him to co-host. So anonymous attendee says, what feedback have you had so far that makes you quietly confident that it will pass through? Sorry, have you done that one? Apologies, I must have missed that. What are tenant associations doing to promote the consultation to tenants?
They're not at the moment, because I mean, I think this is where it's very tricky. I don't have many associations down in my neck of the woods, I believe, that are HMOs. I'm sure there are around the country. But my thoughts are, if they've been individually rebanded, and I bet they haven't, because I bet they've been exempt because they're a government body. I don't know if Alan wants to have a little thought on that, but I wouldn't be surprised they're exempt. However, if those people have had their rooms individually rebanded and they may be claiming benefits, they will have a huge reduction in their council tax bill. However, what I have seen is housing benefit tenants, or John, what's the new word now for housing benefit? universal tax credit.
Yeah.
I've seen tenants living in HMO rooms with universal tax credit that have had their properties rebanded individually. They then get a reduction of maybe 80% on their council tax. They've then got a small bill, and I'm now hearing that they're going back to their local authority asking for a discretionary payment to pay the council tax on a property that shouldn't have been rebanded in the first place. So the government is basically paying for the government's council tax cost. So you can see from those who are joining for the first time, you can see how much of a car crash this is.
Okay, can I bring in John for a moment here? So John is our technical guru behind the scenes. He sorts us out, he tidies up our Google Drive on a daily basis, and he makes sure everything is accessible for everybody. So John, would you like to just explain what we're offering to people in terms of the packs?
Let's see if this works. Can you all see my little Facebook page?
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know if everyone here is on this Facebook group, but hopefully you are. If you aren't, put in a request. At the top, we've got various feature pages, tonight's webinar, and scroll along. There's a little one here called the Welcome Pack. We've also got. See if I can get this to work. I'm on a little laptop here. Oh gosh. We've also got our main website, which Wendy will be sending links out to. So the docs that we're going to share that that Darren's just been through will be posted on there. But it's also on here. And so I can get rid of this. So this is our main welcome pack, generally, but you know, the whole background of the whole thing. I've got this little NC7 section in here. We previously had a whole campaign to write to our MPs. Thanks for everyone who did that. This is the bit about the consultation. So this one is a little wrapper page about this whole NC7 and how we're going to respond to it. This was on the back of Caroline's speech and request for the NC7 consultation. And this is where the docs are for you to go through. And you can take a PDF version or a sort of a Word doc version here, and you can copy questions and edit them and tweak them into an email. This page, this one here says, basically what you need to do is, we've got to the 31st of March to do this. You send an email to Council Tax Leveling Up Group and go through, you know, just you could whiz through and copy and paste them out, and ideally edit them to suit your situation. That's basically it, I think, Wendy, from my point.
Great, that's wonderful. Listen, John, thank you very, very much indeed for doing that, because that's incredibly helpful. We're also going to put into that folder the links to our website and the advanced consultation. So maybe I should just sort of introduce this, and then Alan, we can maybe look at a couple of the questions that we've devised. Well, really, you devised it, and I just typed it out as you were speaking. But we as a group are going to clearly be responding to the consultation, but our response is going to be a little bit more technical, because we believe that we want to really, you know, sock it to them with a full punch. And our amazing tool for doing this is, of course, the amazing Mr. Alan Murdy, who has really helped us to formulate that. So let me just quickly get rid of John there a minute. So I'm going to just perhaps look at a couple of our answers, Alan. We don't want to, you know, make everybody sort of die because of the technicality of it all.
Let me just say, make a general point here, and particularly to anybody who's tuned in, who's never been involved with consultations before on an official level like this. I've been involved with many over the last 30 plus years. And the overall impression that I have of the civil service and of government in a range of subjects is, do not overestimate the knowledge that you think that government and the people receiving these commissions, these things such as Law Commission, all kinds of consultations, actually have. Frequently, they have to launch consultations because they don't actually know the facts themselves. They only have got a snapshot. And this is what makes each individual contribution very important indeed. Because behind the term HMO, there are actually a very wide range of differing circumstances and arrangements. HMOs run from or range from purely commercial operations, landlord and tenant. They include hostels for vulnerable people. They include charitable institutions. They include collections of bedsits, which have somehow just lasted for many, many years. There is a very wide range of circumstances. And each and everyone's knowledge and experience in this type of thing is relevant. I think one of the reasons this consultation has actually been launched is not because the government knows all the answers. The fact is it doesn't. Wendy repeated my view. Council tax is a mess. Yes, it is. And this is one of the few opportunities that's come along in the last 12 years to actually rectify the part of the mess, because it's built up over the last 20 years. The problems that we're talking about tonight, frankly, have come about really just in the last 8 years. This type of problem did not happen, but because of the accumulating contradictions within a system which has just been passed along from administration to administration, going back to 2005, when the government of the day bottled out of doing a national revaluation for England. And each successive administration since then has done this. They have got to the point where they have now accepted this system has got to change in some way. But your knowledge, what people, your own experience is relevant to this. That's even if you don't feel that you fully understand the complexities, don't be ashamed. Plenty of lawyers don't. Even the higher courts themselves have been divided on some of these points. I see this exercise as very much somebody in government has actually said, well, we don't know the answers. Can you tell us? And this is the opportunity.
I think that was very nicely put, Alan.
Yes, very, very good.
Put here, Alan is nicely trying to say that a lot of people in Westminster are thick. Which made me chuckle, Alan, halfway through your talk. So your speech, I do apologise. Before Alan goes into
the technical response,
question, can I just say to people on the chat, and this is not me trying to sell anything, so please don't think so. But this group takes money to run. Yeah, what we have achieved so far is phenomenal. You'll see on our website page that there is a way that you can donate money. If everyone just donated a little bit, it would help this group to carry on through the consultation, through the legislation of law, and allow us to lobby as much as we have done. So this is not me having a plea. We had a £15,000 goal. We're a third of the way there. We know this affects hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and it affects hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of landlords. So, all I'm asking for is you don't have to. We're not doing this for that reason. But if you can share some money to help towards this, we have got a lot of expenditure still to come. And there's a lot of mileage, especially that me, Wendy and Alan are doing. We're going up and down the country talking to a lot of groups because we want this to happen. So that is my little plea. I'm not trying to sell anything. Please don't think I am. But if we can help in any way, then please donate. That's me done. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, well said. We did want to just put a bit of a plug in there. So
how do we pay? You'll find the link on the website. I'm sure Wendy could probably find another way of putting it in the chat.
I'll put it on the documents. I'm creating a whole list of documents at the moment
Okay.
in that shared folder, and I'll add it to that. Yeah. Yeah, I've just put the Facebook group in there at the moment, so I'll add it to that. Okay, let's just move on to Alan then. If we could maybe just talk about some of the questions, Alan, on the more what I call the legal consultation. If I share my screen again and get that up, and we can go through. There's a couple of issues which I think is quite useful from the point of case law. So I'm going to start with, I think this is question 1. We don't have this quite exactly the same as Darren's one. It's a slightly different format, but we're going to tidy that up. That's something just needs tidying up. So let me go to this. So this is the aggregation question. So I don't know, Alan, whether you want to talk a little bit about some of the cases here that might be useful for people to hear about.
Yes.
Perhaps you could talk about Ross Cranston in Salisbury versus Bunyan, for example.
Indeed. Well, this was a High Court case involving rebanding of what had been a single property, and it's important because the judge who heard it in the divisional court, Sir Ross Cranston, actually states in his judgment that there is a division between the case law, because in rebanding after rebanding, the VOA trots out 3 or 4 of the same authorities. The earliest one goes back to 1949 to justify splitting up what has hitherto been a single banded HMO. What the VOA don't look at other cases which say, well, that isn't the way to do it. In particular, there's a case called Corkish and Wright in 2014, where it's seen as a multiple test, looking at both the physical construction of the dwelling and its use, and a degree of flexibility. But also the judge in that case, Mr. Justice Popperwell, talks about how any decision must also relate to modern contemporary standards of living. And frankly, there's a great deal of difference, for example, going between the standards that were deemed acceptable at the end of the Second World War, when there was a shortage of accommodation, and the sort of accommodation you would expect in the 21st century for people to actually live in. And the important thing about Salisbury and Bunyan is this is the High Court basically saying, look, the case law itself is now in conflict. That makes the point for the government to actually do something about this, where there is a conflict between case law, a grey area that's arisen in the law, then that is the point when Parliament should step in to clarify it.
Okay, excellent. Okay. If it looks like I'm not interested, Alan, I am interested. I'm trying to listen to you.
Know the effect of this sort of thing on audiences for having talked on it. I also mentioned another case called Rear Dwelling London, which was a decision of the former Valuation Tribunal for England President, Professor Graham Zelig, who actually basically in this was a large property which was divided into floors used by live-in domestic servants and workers of the family who owned the property, and it was again where the VOA had stepped in and come up with multiple bandings, where in fact it went to the president of the Valuation Tribunal. He looked at it and he said, well, really, it should only be on a floor basis. And if we actually still had Graham Zelig in charge of the Valuation Tribunal for England, I don't think we would have many of the problems that we've been encountering. Unfortunately, retired in 2017, and the VOA has now set about or continued on the course it's begun. So you can be, as Darren said earlier, you can be rebanded on a floor basis. But if it is a self-contained floor, I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but it's certainly a lot better than having 9 ensuite bedrooms turned into the equivalent of 9 Band A council taxes.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's the other thing is that it's one of those cases, or one of several cases, Caucasian Right 2014, and also rear dwelling London, that but the kindest thing I can say is the VOA, and to an extent the Valuation Tribunal for England now, just shuts its eyes to and pretends that they've never taken place.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other part of this injustice that we believe. It's not just the fact that listings officers have got discretion to be able to say, yeah, we think that should have council tax applied to that non-self-contained room by dint of the tenancies, for example, which is one of the methods they use, which again we think is wrong. But the other aspect is the lack of justice in being able to challenge it at valuation tribunal level. So in this particular document, we have raised some more of those, what we'd call technical legal issues. Now, I'm being asked quite a lot, can we get access to this? Yes, you will. We need to edit this slightly because this is obviously a little bit more technical than the other one, but we will put that in the shared folder too. So you might want to look at both of the responses and then amalgamate them or use them to make your own response up. But obviously there are some very good citations here of case law, many of which have been brushed under the carpet, and the VOA basically refused to acknowledge that they exist. And what we're trying to do is shine a light on them to say, these do exist, they're important principles of law that have been established, and you're ignoring them. But of course, that's not the kind of debate that everybody wants to get into. Now, one of the other questions that we should perhaps also talk about is the Woolway versus Mazars one, Alan. It might be worth you just talking a little bit about that case that we mentioned.
Well, yes, this was the Supreme Court's examination of the problem of what effectively was a self-contained property and what should be classed as part of another in the case of business property in a situation involving some offices. And it uses the word hereditament or hereditament, however you wish to approach it. It's the same word. They were looking at its use in the Local Government Finance Act 1988, and it's exactly the same word which appears in the Local Government Finance Act 1992, which gives us the council tax. Now, in that case, Lord Sumption, paragraph 12 of the judgment, actually comes up with some very good principles to identify effectively a self-contained unit within a property. And he says it's partly a cartographical test. That is, what does the plan show you? Then, and this is where the VOA has quietly shuts its eyes in terms of modern council tax valuations of HMOs, he says it's also importantly a construction test. It is a bricks and mortar test. How is the place physically constructed and built? Is it actually built as a separate property, which may well then be reflected on a plan? And the third element he brings in that you should examine or direct yourself on is, what is the function? How does it actually operate in practice? Does it really operate as part of a separate unit to another one, or do they basically operate together? Or are they connected? Is there a nexus between them? Now, he sets this out very nicely in 3 principles. As I said, this shows the arguments that are not confined to this area. They've been kicked back and forth in courts and tribunals between lawyers and so forth for many years. It reached all the way up to the Supreme Court. Well, in that case, he comes down on these set of principles. How do you identify it? Well, I think it's worth reminding the VOA of the existence of this case. It's another case that they shut their eyes to. And they shut their eyes to it on the basis that this was to do with business property rather than a domestic council tax place you actually live in, where in fact it's exactly the same word and it's exactly the same issue. So putting this in, effectively, the amendment that's being proposed, NC7, would result in, again, it's another thing where the law would be tidied up. The law would become consistent in the assessment of properties. It's effectively saying that when the word hereditament appears in the Local Government Finance Act 1988, it means exactly the same thing as when the word hereditament appears in the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Sorry for the somewhat long-winded technical legal answer, but that's what Woolway and Mazar's on our citation of it. It's to actually make this law consistent, to join. It's a bit of joined up legal thinking that will just benefit everybody.
Okay, and sorry.
Alan, that's why you're qualified to give those legal answers.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why we need you, Alan. We need you.
Yeah, we need you, Alan. All right. So don't apologise for the technical answer.
No, but I do sympathise with anybody who actually has to listen to this stuff. I mean, you know, I sometimes give lectures on aspects of council tax recovery and enforcement and appeals to bodies such as Citizens Advice and the Institute of Money Advisors, and I sometimes get advisors saying, "Well, we tried what it said in chapter 7 of your book, and it didn't work." And then I say, "Well, have you looked at chapter 12?" And they say, "Oh no, I didn't read it." You know, I don't blame people. You know, this stuff is not thrilling and exciting.
Can I just say one thing though? There's 160 people on this webinar tonight, and probably a lot of you, Alan, haven't actually met you before. Without Alan, we wouldn't have written the NC7 amendment. Yeah. That is key. Yeah. I've learned a lot from Alan in the last 18 months. Alan's had to put up with me for the last 18 months, and I don't think any amount of money is worth that, Alan. But the NC7 amendment was written by Alan, and that is why we are here where we are today, because there was a lady within government who sort of challenged Alan in terms of the legal part of the NC7 amendment, and Alan pushed back. And between those two people, one being a civil servant within the government and one being Alan, is how we got the NC7 amendment heard. So,
well, indeed, she wasn't just a civil servant; she was actually a qualified parliamentary draftsman whose daily job is actually writing legislation.
So again, Alan has told you the technical person and her job role. So I do apologise. But yeah, basically without Alan, we wouldn't have had that NC7 amendment. So while some of this is very technical, we are so fortunate as a group that we have Alan within our group.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can I just ask, we're coming up to 8:30 now. We've been on the webinar nearly an hour and a half. If there are any further questions or final questions, I'm thinking we probably have kind of exhausted the topic for tonight. I'm sure we all need to go down, lie down in a darkened room or have a stiff drink, or maybe both. Thank you again very much, everybody, for being on. You know, some of you have stuck with it through thick and thin. Others have had other things to go off and do, which is absolutely fine, of course. But if there's anything else that you'd like to know or anything we can help you with, we'll stay on for the next couple of minutes. So Wendy, the recording will be on our website. Have I put that? I think I put that link up there. Let me just see if I can get that link again. I'll put it in the chat panel, and the pack that you can download will also be on our website, so that you can go onto there and download information. You'll have to just put in your email address, but don't worry, we're not going to spam you. It's just so that we can keep out the spammers. Actually, that's why we have it in there. So I'll just put that in the chat panel for you.
Let's just recap a few people. Yes, this is recorded and the recording will be shared. Wendy, where will you share it?
I'll share it on the Facebook group. I will also put it on our website.
Okay. And if anyone listening tonight who's not on our Facebook group, please go and join. I would love us to get up to 2,000 people before the consultation period ends. I think we're about 1,600.
Yes, about 1,600. Yeah, I
So-
haven't looked at numbers today. But
So
yeah.
and we need 20% more roughly to get to where I think would be great. We have a great voice now and we have a great platform to push on. And all I can say is if we get this change by May, which is when I hope that will happen, it's going to be one hell of a party.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to celebrate in only the way that landlords know how to celebrate.
Well,
and you'll all be invited.
Let's just remember that the way I approach it is this is essentially an issue of justice. And as Darren said and Wendy said, this is actually an issue where the interests of both landlords, decent landlords, and their tenants coincide. Yeah. And so it is very fundamental to how law operates, in my view, and the whole justice that taxpayers can and should expect from a system like council tax.
Completely. And all these people that are on the group tonight, probably a majority are landlords who have tenants living and renting their HMOs. If your property hasn't been rebanded, still get your tenants to fill out the consultation, because, and Wendy's heard me say this hundreds of times, the VOA train has left the station and we are all on platforms being picked up. And it doesn't matter whereabouts you are in the country, that train is coming down the track. So if your tenants haven't been rebanded, believe me, it doesn't look good moving forward if this law doesn't change. So as many HMO tenants need to respond to the consultation. We're just about to go live with all our Propodians who live in our Propod houses next week. There's 75 there already that hopefully we can get to respond, because they are paying nearly £78 per month per person to live in one of our Propod houses. So guys, look, we've got a huge voice here and we can get hundreds and hundreds of tenants to respond as well, because it's not just about us as landlords, it's about tenants. And I think that's huge. And as Alan said, I don't know any other consultation that's involved landlords and tenants as much as this one has, Alan.
And actually, just one other one is, of course, agents. We haven't talked much about agents or operators, but if tonight you're maybe an agent or an operator, or you manage HMOs but maybe you don't own them, or you maybe do rent to rent, which is kind of, you run them but you perhaps don't own the building, this counts as well. You count, your voice matters as well, and you might want to put something in there about your experience of managing HMOs that have been rebanded, or your views about it. Again, as an agent, you know the law, you understand those parameters, so that's very, very valuable as well. So we're going to be circulating this. Actually, we're going to slightly, this is where the legal one is going to have a few edits, because we want to make sure that agents can also utilize that document too.
Rachel Davis, how do you suggest we approach tenants who haven't been rebanded yet? If you want the Darren Brewer answer, I'd offer them some pizza, send them the link and say to them, fill it out while you're having pizza on behalf of us, because believe me, if your rooms get rebanded, your void periods will cost you more than sending some pizzas to that house. I know that sounds a little bit simple, but do you know what? At the end of the day, they're gonna help you, and you're helping them, that they don't get hit, not only for council tax today, but they could also get backdated on the rebanding.
Or indeed, there have also been attempts, and I'm pleased to say we've managed to see them off where they occur, where tenants who've actually left then get pursued for retrospective backdated council tax. Fortunately, applying for discretionary reductions seems to deter councils on that, but this is of great importance to tenant that this is tackled.
I don't know who you are. You might know who I am, but I apologise. I don't know who you are, and you literally live in the same town as I do. And if you want to message me directly, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about your property, because you are literally one road back from a few of our Propod houses. So, Paul, you can find me on the group. Just private message me and I'll happily come and have a coffee with you. It'd be good to meet a few more landlords in our local area. And I think you're right, Craig. I'm going to go round to our houses. I'd happily put on a coach to all members from London to Scarborough. Craig, I think you're right. I'm going to go around to our houses. I'm going to see our tenants, because for the sake of me taking half an hour out of my day to see those tenants, it's all about them, and it's all about our business at the end of the day. And I know people say landlords shouldn't talk about it as a business, but at the end of the day, that's what we are. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. You know, I'm a landlord and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we haven't got long to go, guys. We've literally got sort of 5.5 weeks to make this happen. So we will obviously keep you informed. Please, 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 if you haven't already, join our Facebook group, because you'll get up-to-date information there. Sometimes we have a few days where it's very quiet, because as you can see behind the scenes, we're very, very active. So please forgive us if we don't always communicate with you about what's happening. It's just... doing everything can get extremely busy at times. I do thank you, first of all, for being here, and I do hope you'll fill out that consultation. Please come back to us if you've got any further questions. The Facebook group is the best place to ask questions. And when everything is uploaded to the website, I will put that link on Facebook as well tomorrow. And just thank you very, very much indeed for all your support and your time this evening. We really appreciate you. You are so important to us. So we really appreciate your donations, your time, and also your commitment to this cause. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. That's it for this evening. There's more questions, but we can chat. We can follow those up on Facebook. If anyone's got any further questions that we haven't answered tonight, please put them on the Facebook page, and I promise we will get to them. Tomorrow, actually, Darren and I at an HMO conference, and so no doubt we will get some feedback and some chatting from people there, and we will do our very, very best to make sure that we, keep you updated and informed with what's going on and what the next steps are. But yeah, the key is fill out the consultation, and we will see you on the other side.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your support. Let's get this done.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good evening.